Proverbs 23 is one of those chapters in the Old Testament that you probably are very familiar with what's in it. I know in the last couple Proverbs, there have been a few verses that have been quite familiar sounding to us, that they get quoted a lot. In this one, there's a lot of that. We're going to see that we know Proverbs 23 quite a bit, even though we haven't maybe read it a lot ourselves. So let's go through this and catch these familiarities as they jump out. Verse 1, when thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee. That's a good point. If you're sitting down with a ruler, consider what is before you, basically. So it says here, and put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. Now that might sound kind of harsh, basically. If you are gluttonous, if you have problems, it's not going to go well when you're in the presence of a ruler. Usually there's lots of formalities and things that you're going to go through in this dinner. So if you're gluttonous, it's not going to be a good situation. Verse 3, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. So delicacies. So you have to realize if you're like, oh, I want what he's got. If you get covetous of the delicacies, the special foods and things the king gets, you're going to run into problems. Verse 4, labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. So very good advice for us, basically, is, and it might sound weird, if I'm not getting wealthy from my labor, then what's the point of labor? There's some truth to that. But here's the thing to understand is labor, getting wealthy shouldn't be why we labor. We can still labor to benefit ourselves. We can labor to benefit other people without becoming wealthy at that process. So just look at our motivations. Cease from thine own wisdom. I think that's an important one to look at. We talked about in the last one as well, and even in the Proverbs 21, we talked about the maps of reality, understanding if you believe in your map so much that you reject everybody else's maps, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end of the stick. So you need to be careful with that. Verse 5, wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly as an eagle toward heaven. So again, why worry about the things of this world? Do not focus on the things that can't bring you true joy and happiness. Wealth comes and goes. You want true happiness. Verse 6, eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye, neither desire thou his dainty meats. So again, if somebody is wicked, they have that evil eye, they're looking for how to enrich themselves, how to hurt other people. Don't deal with those people, basically. And this is why, verse 7, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's probably a phrase you've heard a ton. That's Proverbs 23:7. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. So again, we can think one thing, we can do outward stuff and think different inside. There's a duality to us. So it's what's inside that makes the difference, and that's what God judges us on. Verse 8, the morsel which thou hast eaten shalt thou vomit up, and loose thy sweet word. So again, if you try to ingest good, but you're not good inside, it's not going to jive. You're not going to do that. It's going to be bad. So think of this not so much as we're talking about eating food, how to eat food. We're talking about how to understand truth. That's an important point to look at here. In fact, verse 9, speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. Absolutely. Somebody who's not willing to pay attention and learn, it does you no good. It does you no good to try to convince them. Okay, your job isn't to convince people of the truth. If you share the truth and they don't accept it, that is their choice. That is something going on inside of them. They're holding fast to what they believe and not willing to learn more. This happens all the time. This happens all the time. And so we just want to be careful with that. In fact, I had somebody that was trying to, it was funny, I had somebody who was correcting me in some religious things. They had a bunch of examples of things that they wanted to tell me. This is the way you should do it. And they said, I don't care what you've learned. I don't even want to understand it. I just want you to do what I want you to do, is basically what it came down to. And it kind of goes along this. If they're not willing to learn, I just shut up and said, okay, that's fine. Because it's not up to me to make people learn. people have to be willing to learn. So oftentimes when you're dealing with truth, realize you cannot impose the truth on other people. All you can do is talk about the truth and let people decide if they want to accept it or reject it. Sometimes they're not quite to a point yet where they can understand it. Sometimes they're flat out don't want to know it. So whatever the case is, if you share truth and people don't seem to respond to it, don't try to force it on them. That never works. Never works, okay? Especially with children. You cannot force your children to be the religion you are. You can't force them to believe what you believe. You have to present the truth to them and let them choose it. That's your goal. Present them. Demonstrate to them the examples, the benefits of that truth. And then they have a greater chance of accepting it. But they have to have their agency to accept it. You can't force it. Very, very important thing to always think about. So remove verse 10. This is interesting because we saw this in the last, in Proverbs 22 as well, in dealing with what has been done in the past. Remove not the old landmark. Enter not into the fields of the fatherless. So again, in ancient Israel, they had landmarks that showed this is the inheritance land you have. So they've marked it off. This is your property, and you have a right to it. And you shouldn't be moving those landmarks. And what it's talking about basically is if you're entering into the field of the fatherless, you're entering into fields of other people who are destitute and have problems. Okay, if a family is fatherless, they've got lots of issues because women were not allowed back then to do a lot of things. They're disadvantaged. So if you start to encroach and take over them, you are ruining their future. And you're enriching yourself at the same expense. That's greed and pride. That's not a good thing, basically. And so think about that too. Verse 11, for their Redeemer is mighty. He shall plead their cause with thee. So again, always remember. Always, 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 always remember. How you treat people is very important to think about. Mainly because of verse 11. At some point, you're going to have to stand before God and answer to what you did with those people. And if they are downtrodden, if they are if they are despised of this world, if they are put down in this world, then they have a claim. If you're making decisions that negatively impact their life, they have a greater claim on the atonement of Jesus Christ to help them in their life. And he will help them and he will be an advocate for them when you get to the bar of God. Realize there's this judgment day still to come that's going to deal with all the craziness and weirdness of this life. And you're going to have to answer for everything. That's what these are getting at. And so plan your decisions around, what do I want to have to explain to God? Do I want to have to explain to God why I treated this person bad? Do I want to explain to God why this person got injured because of my stupidity? Am I going to have to explain to God why I abused that person? Doesn't matter what nature of abuse, physical, financial, anything. You're going to have to answer for it. Why did I treat that person like crap? Well, God's going to ask you, hey, why did you treat my son or daughter like crap? And you know what? Because of the amount of truth exuding from God, there's no way you can lie your way around it. Because he knows the truth. He sees it. You'll be like, oh, here's what I did. And he'll say, well, let's pull the little flash drive out of your head of your memories and let's look at what was going on and let's put the commentary of your internal thoughts on this video as we watch what was happening here. There's no way around that. You're going to have to pay for it. So plan as if you're going to have to pay for it. I don't want to have to pay for that. Then don't do it. Don't get mad at that people. Don't get slighted about it. Don't try to seek revenge if you know you're going to hate answering for it in front of God. That's really what they're saying here. That's what verse 7 is. For their Redeemer, so this is talking about the fatherless, the downtrodden. Their Redeemer is mighty, and he shall plead their cause with thee. He's going to be their advocate, not yours. And you're going to have to answer for it. So just treat people nice. Realize there's a judgment coming. And it's all going to be figured out and all going to be accurate and honest and just. And that does not mean you come out on the bright side all the time. You're going to have to understand that you may have some things to repent of. So repent now. Don't do it. Get it out now before you get to that point. Don't get into those crazy things. So verse 12, apply thine heart unto instruction and thy ears to the words of knowledge. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Now, verse 13 is an interesting one. We need to be careful about verse 13 because it is talking about disciplining a child. Withhold not correction from the child. And I think this is important that we look at this and in our day and age especially realize that correcting a child is not going to kill them. Correcting a child is not going to be bad. That does not mean we have to beat the child. That does not mean that we have to be abusive to the child. That means we have to be willing to say, hey, I don't think you're going in the right direction. I don't think that's going to work out the way you want. Will you let me help you to have this go better? Okay. Never take away the agency of the child. Never. That's an important thing. If you take away the agency of the child and you make the choice for them, you will probably be held accountable for what happens. You have to help them to have agency. The whole goal of parenting is to take this baby who is 100% dependent on you, and by around 18 years of age, they're 100% independent of you. If you want good adults, they have to learn how to use their agency. Very, very, very important point. So correcting them is how you help them go, no, you're off course. Let's help you come back. But again, it's their agency. If they don't want the correction, then it's up to them. Okay, this verse is not saying you should beat your kid almost to death. That's not what it's saying. Not at all. It's saying you need to correct your child, and it's going to be good in the long run to correct them. You need to correct them. So verse 14, thou shalt beat him with a rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. So that's what they're talking about here is, again, discipline. Now this, again, is not talking about abuse. Now, I know back then, that wasn't an uncommon thing. Back then, I mean, if you stole something, they cut your arm off. The capital punishment was a common theme. In fact, capital punishment was something that family could do against you. So they were definitely a lot more forceful in what they did back then. But the thing that we understand these days is, again, it's not, we should discipline. We should help correct the children, should help them, but understand that they ultimately have to make their own choices too. We can't take their choice away from them. That's not going to be appropriate. Verse 15, my son, if thine heart be wise, my heart shall rejoice, even mine. Yea, my rein shall rejoice when thy lips speak right things. Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. So this is kind of those verses there are kind of an aside to the advice, saying, hey, I'm writing this to you to help you to learn to be wise. This could be Solomon to his son Rehoboam, who's going to be the next king. This could be other people in here as well. But it's important for us to look at, they're directing this to his son, which is why it's written to a male audience. Now, verse 20, be not among wine bibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Lots of truth in that. If you are gluttonous, if you just live for the moment and spend for the moment, you're going to find finances a hard thing. It's going to be an issue. Like in today's world, if we were to update this to today's world, if you're buying all the stuff you can, if you're just financing everything because it's easy and you can have it now and you don't have to pay for a while or whatever, you're going to end up, it'll look like you have a lot of stuff. But in reality, you'll have nothing. You'll have nothing. It was easier to see that back then because, again, the real value was in the money. And as soon as it left your hand into somebody else's, it was gone. Whereas in today's world, with credit, we can appear to have lots of stuff without paying for it. And a lot of people do this. Oh, I can buy the boats, I can buy the RVs, I can buy the cars and the trucks and go on the vacations and do stuff. I'll just use my credit card and eventually I'll just file bankruptcy and get rid of it all and not have to worry about it. Still, you're going to lose. You're going to have problems. And in the end, it's not going to work out for you. So verse 22, hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. So listen to your parents. Buy the truth and sell it not. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding. So again, acquire truth And don't let it go. Don't give up the truth. Stay with it. Keep it with you at all times. Very, very important. So, verse 24, the father of righteousness shall greatly rejoice. He that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. Very, very important. There's a lot in there. And ladies, I'm sure you've got some great ideas. If you've been a mother, if you've done that, what is that like to see that joy in yourself watching your children do well? So some great things we can look at with this. Now continuing forward here, verse 26, my son, give me thine heart. Let thine eyes observe my ways. So again, pay attention. Pay attention to my life. Let me teach you from my life what's going on. He's going to teach him some things here. So there's a good chance this is Solomon talking to his sons, because Solomon made a lot of mistakes. And so we're going to see some of these teachings come out. So probably this is probably older in Solomon's life after he realized his mistakes. So these are the things he's trying to convey to his son. He says, verse 27, for a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait as for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. So he's saying, don't do these things. Don't get sucked into the lusts of the flesh. Don't get sucked into the gluttonous of the flesh, basically, because it's going to be a problem. If you lie down in the sea, what does that mean? You're going to be moved all over the place. Your ability to have agency is severely limited because your environment is controlling you. And then verse 35, he says, they have stricken me. Shalt thou say, and I was not sick? They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. So again, he's saying, I've been there, done that. I've gone through this. Don't do what I did. Listen, learn from my mistakes, basically. Listen to these things. This is important for us to understand better what we need to do to help improve our lives. So learn from my mistakes, basically. So there's a good chance this is Solomon talking to his at least one of his sons, if not more. So let's jump over to our next proverb as we continue to learn more great wisdom.